You think you can run this deal without knowing the truth? Caroline Smith's voice cut through the polished conference room, echoing off the high ceilings and the sleek glass walls as if the air itself had paused to listen. The room, furnished with dark mahogany and leather chairs, fell into a hush. Papers rustled and a pen dropped, unnoticed, onto the marble floor. Amber Johnson sat at the head of the table, her posture rigid but calm, fingers folded atop the folder marked with the bold letters, $850 million acquisition proposal. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the glint of her watch, reflecting tiny shards of gold that seemed to punctuate her measured breathing. Every executive in the room shifted uneasily in their chairs, the subtle clicks of polished shoes against the hardwood floor forming a quiet drumroll. Caroline's presence was magnetic and intimidating, a white-gloved hand brushing a strand of perfectly styled hair as she leaned forward, her eyes sharp with expectation, yet Amber did not flinch. Around them, the board members exchanged glances, some eyebrows raised, some lips pressed thin, caught between curiosity and apprehension. The air smelled faintly of fresh ink and coffee, a mundane scent juxtaposed with the tension that thickened around the long, polished table. Amber's gaze moved slowly across each person, noting the subtle gestures, the tightening grip on a pen, a faint clearing of a throat, the micro-expressions that spoke louder than words. Her mind raced yet remained anchored, each detail of the contract scrutinized in the mental ledger she carried meticulously for months, the late nights poring over clauses and footnotes, each calculation and projection a testament to her precision and dedication. Caroline's hand tapped lightly against the edge of the table, a rhythmic sound that seemed to amplify the silence around them, drawing attention to the subtle authority she wielded simply by standing, yet Amber's voice, when it came, was even and deliberate, slicing through the tension without raising, yet demanding, attention. I've reviewed the liability clauses, and there are discrepancies that could jeopardize the entire merger, Amber stated, her tone calm, clear, and unwavering. A faint murmur traveled across the room like a ripple in a still pond, heads turning, pens pausing midair, some leaning slightly forward as if to catch each word. The sunlight caught the edge of the contract in Amber's hand, highlighting the crisp lines of the paper as if the universe itself was spotlighting the truths she was poised to deliver. Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line, a flicker of surprise crossing her expression before it was masked by her practiced composure. Amber did not rush, did not falter, the room's collective breath held in quiet suspense as the subtle clock on the far wall ticked almost imperceptibly, marking moments that seemed suspended, each second a microcosm of anticipation. Outside, the city hummed faintly, distant traffic and the low rumble of construction blending into the background, a reminder of the world beyond the high-rise sanctuary where power, poise, and intellect collided. Amber's hand shifted slightly, tapping the folder, a quiet assertion of presence, an unspoken signal that though she might be young, she was both competent and unyielding, ready to command attention through reason and clarity rather than volume or theatrics. The boardroom remained still, a silent audience to the opening act of a confrontation that promised to challenge expectations, to unsettle assumptions, and to lay the groundwork for the revelations yet to come as Amber's calm precision contrasted sharply with Caroline's poised intensity, setting the stage for the unfolding narrative where intellect, integrity, and courage would define the room's atmosphere and the story that would ripple far beyond the marble walls. Amber Johnson leaned back slightly in her chair, the weight of responsibility pressing evenly across her shoulders, each movement deliberate as if she were a conductor orchestrating silence rather than sound. The sunlight glinted off the polished surface of her tablet, illuminating graphs and annotations she had painstakingly prepared in the quiet hours of the night before, a testament to her preparation and the meticulous attention to detail that defined her work. Her office had always been a sanctuary of order and clarity, walls lined with books on corporate law, finance, and organizational strategy, each title a silent witness to the years of study and focus that had brought her to this very moment. Outside the glass doors, the city hummed with life, distant car horns and the low rumble of trucks blending into a constant undercurrent. Yet within the room, time seemed to stretch, giving every gesture, every glance, an amplified resonance. Amber's eyes, steady and discerning, followed the flow of information on the screen, her fingers tracing lines of text and numbers that could decide the fate of millions of dollars and influence the direction of a major corporation. Each decision she made was calculated, informed by experience and foresight, not by impulse or intimidation. In her mind, she reviewed the chain of communications, the memos, and the reports, cataloging potential risks and noting inconsistencies that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Her calm was not passive. It was the result of deliberate preparation, the kind that transformed pressure into clarity. She adjusted the cuff of her tailored navy suit, the fabric crisp and precise, and the subtle scent of her perfume mingled with the faint aroma of coffee that lingered in the room, creating an environment that was both alert and composed. Amber's attention shifted briefly to a framed photograph on her desk, a subtle reminder of her roots and the people who had instilled in her the principles of diligence, integrity, and perseverance. A single glance was enough to center her, reaffirming the confidence and steadiness that carried through her work. She straightened a stack of documents, aligning each edge perfectly, a small but symbolic gesture that mirrored the precision with which she approached larger challenges. Each movement, from tapping a pen lightly against the table to adjusting the angle of her chair, was measured, purposeful, a choreography of professionalism and composure. Outside the room, the faint click of high heels approached, a soft rhythm that echoed against the marble floors, signaling the entrance of her executive assistant, ready to brief her with updates, inquiries, and logistical details, all of which Amber received with an unwavering focus. Her mind catalogued the incoming information, prioritizing and assessing the implications in a way that seemed almost instinctive, yet was grounded in years of disciplined practice. Every glance at the screens, every note jotted in the margins of reports, reinforced her control over the unfolding events, her command over the room, and her ability to navigate complex scenarios with calm authority. The sunlight shifted slightly, glinting across the edge of the polished table, highlighting the intricate networks of data and projections that lay before her, a visual testament to the careful orchestration that defined her approach to leadership and decision-making. Amber's breathing remained steady, a quiet rhythm that matched the calm, deliberate atmosphere she cultivated around herself, each inhale and exhale a small affirmation of her presence and readiness. In these moments, she was not just a participant in the corporate world, she was a meticulous architect of strategy, a guardian of integrity, and a figure whose calm certainty set the tone for the room even before words were spoken. The office door opened silently, revealing the towering figure of Caroline Smith as she stepped into the room, her presence commanding attention without uttering a word, the soft tap of her heels against the polished floor marking her arrival. Amber Johnson did not look up immediately, her focus trained on the spreadsheets and financial projections spread meticulously across the table, but the faint reflection of movement in the glossy surface of the folder drew her eyes. Caroline's gaze swept over the room, the intensity in her amber eyes meeting Amber's calm, unwavering stare, a subtle dance of authority and composure playing out in silence. The board members shifted in their seats, glances exchanged in near imperceptible flashes, the air thick with anticipation, each individual aware that the unfolding interaction carried the weight of millions in assets and reputations. Amber's fingers tapped lightly against the edge of the tablet, a rhythmic counterpoint to the quiet murmur of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the hum of traffic and the distant sirens blending seamlessly into the background, a steady soundtrack to the tense elegance of the room. Caroline's expression, composed and exacting, betrayed the faintest flicker of surprise at Amber's unflinching posture and deliberate pace, the slight tilt of her head signaling the unspoken challenge that hung between them. Amber's mind catalogued every detail, the layout of the documents, the tone and inflection in Caroline's measured voice, the subtle micro-expressions of the other executives, all forming a tapestry of information that informed her next measured statement. Each decision, each pause, was calibrated to project authority and precision without the need for elevated volume or overt gesture. The sunlight shifted through the tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the table, the glint of polished surfaces reflecting in Amber's eyes as she considered the implications of each clause, each number, and each precedent, her thoughts weaving a web of strategy and foresight that reinforced the quiet power emanating from her composed figure. Caroline moved closer to the table, the soft rustle of her suit fabric punctuating the silence, yet Amber's attention never wavered, her breathing steady, her posture upright, a silent signal of preparedness and unshakable confidence. The digital clock on the far wall ticked steadily, each second marked with an almost imperceptible gravity, emphasizing the meticulous rhythm of observation and calculation that Amber maintained. The room, filled with the scent of polished wood, leather, and faintly brewed coffee, seemed to contract around the tension of poised authority, the interplay of perception, intellect, and quiet dominance creating an atmosphere where every small movement carried meaning. Amber's gaze shifted once more to Caroline, noting the precise alignment of her gestures, the controlled cadence of her expression, and the restrained weight of expectation she carried, a delicate counterbalance to Amber's composed fortitude. In these silent exchanges, the boardroom became a stage for intellect, strategy, and the nuanced interplay of power, where control was asserted not through volume or theatrics but through the meticulous orchestration of presence, clarity, and unwavering attention to detail, each breath and glance reinforcing Amber Johnson's command of the moment and the authority she wielded with deliberate grace. Amber Johnson rose smoothly from her chair, the soft glide of her polished shoes against the hardwood floor echoing lightly in the room as she approached the center of the conference table, each step deliberate and measured, radiating confidence and authority without a single word. She extended her hand toward the meticulously organized documents, scanning each line of the contract with eyes that missed nothing, noting subtle discrepancies and phrasing that could alter the outcome of the $85 million merger, her mind calculating the implications with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Caroline Smith leaned slightly forward, a faint crease between her brows signaling attention and restrained surprise, the delicate rhythm of her breathing matching the subtle tapping of a pen from a nearby board member who had been nervously twirling it for several minutes. Amber's voice, calm and clear, filled the quiet space, stating her findings with concise authority, articulating each potential risk and legal nuance in a manner that left no room for misinterpretation, her tone firm yet measured, commanding attention without the need for force or exaggeration. The executives around the table exchanged glances, a few leaning slightly closer to catch every syllable, the subtle shifts in their posture conveying recognition of Amber's expertise and the credibility she carried effortlessly. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the contours of her expression, casting soft reflections across the surface of the table and illuminating the intensity of focus in her eyes, a visual echo of the diligence and preparation that had brought her to this critical moment. Amber moved her hand gently across the folder, pointing to specific clauses and amendments with precise gestures, each movement deliberate, underscoring the clarity and logic of her observations. Caroline's lips pressed into a thin line as she absorbed the information, the faintest hint of acknowledgement in her eyes betraying an appreciation for Amber's composed mastery and unwavering attention to detail. The room's ambient sounds, the low hum of the air conditioning, the distant murmur of traffic beyond the glass walls, the subtle rustle of papers, formed a quiet backdrop that emphasized the tension and anticipation in the space. Amber paused momentarily, allowing the weight of her analysis to settle, each individual in the room processing the meticulous reasoning she had presented, the logic of her argument intertwining seamlessly with the factual details and numerical evidence that reinforced her authority. Her posture remained upright, her breathing steady, her expression calm, conveying a sense of unshakable confidence that subtly shifted the dynamics of power in the room, establishing a quiet command that required neither assertion nor confrontation. Caroline shifted slightly, a faint nod barely perceptible, acknowledging Amber's insight without words, the subtle motion carrying the weight of respect and recognition, an unspoken agreement that intelligence and diligence could not be ignored or underestimated. The atmosphere remained charged with anticipation, the collective focus of all present drawn to Amber's precise articulation and composed demeanor, each participant acutely aware of the unfolding demonstration of competence and the quiet assertion of authority that Amber exuded effortlessly. Each gesture, each glance, and each carefully chosen word layered into the room a tangible sense of respect and attentive awareness, establishing a foundation for the subsequent developments that would challenge assumptions, alter expectations, and reveal the true impact of preparation, skill, and calm confidence in a space defined by power and decision-making. A subtle tension hung in the air as Amber Johnson completed her meticulous presentation, each point carefully articulated, yet the reactions from Caroline Smith and the board members were layered and complex, a mix of disbelief, astonishment, and begrudging respect. Caroline leaned back slightly in her chair, the precise curve of her lips barely betraying a flicker of emotion, as the room absorbed the full weight of Amber's clarity and detailed reasoning. Amber's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the expectant silence, the faint hum of the air conditioning and distant city sounds emphasizing the gravity of the moment, the quiet between words charged with unspoken evaluations and measured judgments. Papers on the table remained undisturbed, yet the subtle movements of fingers tapping pens and faint rustling of documents reflected the internal deliberations of the executives who had been caught off guard by the depth and accuracy of Amber's analysis. Caroline's gaze shifted briefly to a tablet lying on the table, the sunlight glinting off its edge, highlighting the charts and figures Amber had referenced, and for the first time, a hint of acknowledgement crossed her composed expression, a silent recognition that precision and insight could not be dismissed. Amber's eyes scanned the room, registering micro-expressions, noting the slight tension in the shoulders of a senior analyst, the careful posture of the general counsel, the faint tightening of jaws among those who had assumed confidence alone could dominate the proceedings. Her calm, deliberate movements and clear, authoritative voice had subtly shifted the dynamics of power in the room, establishing a new equilibrium where knowledge, preparation, and methodical execution outweighed assumptions of status or entitlement. Caroline's lips parted just slightly as she considered the implications of the discrepancies Amber had identified, a slight frown forming that suggested a reassessment of previously held beliefs, while Amber maintained her composed posture, poised yet approachable, demonstrating that authority could be asserted without theatrics or confrontation. The sunlight continued to move slowly across the room, casting subtle shadows that highlighted the intensity and focus present, accentuating the contrast between Caroline's imposing presence and Amber's quiet, steady confidence. A soft exhale could almost be heard, the collective intake of breath in the room. The subtle shifting of chairs, the nuanced exchange of glances that communicated an unspoken understanding that Amber's diligence had not only revealed critical insights, but had also redefined the expectations of competence and leadership within that space. Every movement, every carefully chosen word, and every gesture reinforced Amber's mastery of the room, her ability to navigate complex scenarios, and her unwavering commitment to clarity, fairness, and strategic foresight. The boardroom, lined with reflective glass, polished surfaces, and muted tones, became a stage where intellect, preparation, and presence converged, and where Amber's calm authority subtly yet unmistakably reshaped the energy of the meeting, establishing her not just as a participant, but as a quiet force whose judgment and insight commanded attention and respect. Amber Johnson stepped back from the table, allowing a slow, deliberate silence to settle over the boardroom, the polished wood and glass surfaces reflecting the afternoon sunlight in a pattern that highlighted the quiet dignity of her composure. She took a deep, measured breath, letting the ambient noises of the city beyond the windows, the distant hum of traffic, a soft whistle of wind along the skyline, fade into the background as her mind catalogued the room, the faces, and the subtle shifts in posture that communicated more than words ever could. The executives remained still, some leaning back, others with hands clasped atop the table, absorbing the clarity and reason embedded in Amber's previous statements, their anticipation mingling with a dawning respect for the careful precision and intellect she displayed. Caroline Smith's gaze softened fractionally, the tilt of her head suggesting contemplation, a quiet acknowledgement of Amber's authority, and the undeniable correctness of her analysis, even as her posture remained upright and poised, an attempt to maintain composure in the face of a reality that challenged her assumptions. Amber's eyes moved deliberately across the room, noting the minutiae of expression, the subtle tightening of shoulders, the faint flutter of eyelids, all indicators of the internal reckoning taking place among the board members. The sunlight shifted imperceptibly, casting dynamic reflections across the surfaces of polished metal and glass, illuminating Amber's profile in a soft, natural glow that underscored the calm assurance she carried, an unspoken reminder of her preparedness and the steady accumulation of expertise that had brought her to this point. She allowed herself a subtle exhale, a measured release that carried no tension, only the quiet rhythm of a mind fully engaged and entirely confident in its analysis. Caroline's hand moved briefly to a document, adjusting its position, a small but deliberate gesture acknowledging Amber's careful guidance, the faint sound of paper against table adding to the rich tapestry of stillness and anticipation in the room. Amber's gaze lingered for a moment longer on each participant, her presence a stabilizing force, her quiet command of detail and accuracy creating a space where intellect reigned over preconceptions and calm reasoning dictated the unfolding interaction. Each minute adjustment of posture, each careful glance, reinforced the subtle authority she held, the unspoken power that came from knowledge, preparation, and clarity of purpose. The room remained hushed, filled with an almost tangible sense of reflection and reevaluation, the executives absorbing the implications of Amber's observations and the undeniable weight of her insight, the city beyond the windows continuing its muted rhythm as a quiet contrast to the intense, yet measured, energy contained within the boardroom. Amber's hand moved slightly, arranging documents with precision, her movements fluid and intentional, a visual testament to the meticulous preparation and disciplined execution that had shaped her approach, underscoring her capacity to influence and guide the decision-making in a space traditionally dominated by status and hierarchy, and allowing the atmosphere to settle into a deliberate, contemplative pause that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The room shifted subtly, an almost imperceptible change in energy as the weight of Amber Johnson's insights settled fully into the minds of everyone present. Caroline. Smith's hand hovered briefly over the contract, then fell slowly to the table, her posture relaxing slightly, a silent admission that the meticulous points Amber had made could not be ignored. The board members exchanged glances, some nodding almost imperceptibly, the tension that had gripped the room beginning to ease into a collective acknowledgement of Amber's precise understanding and the thoroughness of her reasoning. Amber remained poised, her hands resting lightly atop the folder, her breathing steady, her calm demeanor radiating a quiet authority that filled the space without a single raised voice or gestured threat. The sunlight filtering through the tall windows highlighted the contours of her face, the clarity of her expression, and the deliberate confidence she exuded, casting a natural glow that underscored the resolution forming in the room. Caroline's eyes met Amber's, and in that brief exchange, a mutual recognition passed between them, the acknowledgement that Amber's careful preparation and unwavering focus had revealed truths that demanded respect and attention. The executives leaned forward slightly, the gentle shifting of chairs and soft scribbling of notes the only audible sounds, underscoring the room's heightened awareness and the silent processing of the information laid out before them. Amber's gaze scanned the room, noting the subtle signs of reconsideration, the relaxed shoulders, the thoughtful frowns, and the quiet adjustments in posture that indicated an internal recalibration of assumptions and expectations. Every detail, from the angle of the sunlight reflecting off the table to the rhythmic tapping of a pen by a senior analyst, seemed to punctuate the unfolding understanding that Amber's insight was both precise and indispensable. Caroline's lips curved ever so slightly in a restrained acknowledgement, a single movement that conveyed respect without surrendering composure, a gesture that spoke volumes more than words could capture, affirming Amber's influence on the room's evolving dynamics. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city below contrasted with the focused intensity within the conference room, the external calm amplifying the internal clarity and deliberation that Amber maintained throughout the unfolding moment. Her posture remained straight, her hands lightly clasped, her eyes steady, conveying a balance of authority and openness, allowing the room to absorb the full impact of her methodical reasoning and the deliberate cadence of her communication. Subtle shifts in the executive team's body language suggested a newfound respect and a reconsideration of positions previously assumed, the quiet gravity of Amber's observations influencing their perceptions and potential decisions. The sunlight continued its slow traverse across the room, highlighting the polished surfaces, the neat stacks of papers, and Amber's composed figure, emphasizing her command over the situation not through intimidation, but through clarity, poise, and unwavering attention to detail. Every nuance of the interaction, Every controlled movement and measured glance reinforced the shift in authority, the recalibration of expectation, and the recognition that Amber Johnson's intellect and preparation had subtly yet decisively guided the room toward an understanding that demanded acknowledgement and respect. Caroline Smith finally shifted fully back into her chair, the tension that had defined the room gradually dissolving as Amber Johnson's measured confidence and clear insight took firm hold over the atmosphere. She regarded Amber with a quiet, contemplative gaze, the faint crease in her forehead smoothing as she acknowledged internally the precision and thoroughness of every point that had been laid bare in the documents before them. The other executives leaned slightly forward, some adjusting their posture, others exchanging subtle nods, a silent consensus forming in recognition of Amber's meticulous preparation and the integrity of her assessment. Amber remained poised, her hands resting lightly atop the contract, her breathing steady, her calm presence commanding the attention of everyone present without a word raised in volume, each gesture deliberate and intentional, radiating a sense of authority earned through expertise rather than assertion. The sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the glint of Amber's watch and the edge of the polished table, highlighting the composed determination in her expression and the careful rhythm with which she moved and spoke. Caroline's fingers traced lightly along the top of the folder, a small, restrained motion that carried the weight of acknowledgement and emerging respect, a silent understanding that Amber's reasoning was not only correct but indispensable for the company's strategic path forward. Amber's eyes scanned the room once more, noting subtle shifts, the straightened backs, the slight inclinations of heads toward her, the unspoken recognition that her analysis had shifted perspectives and recalibrated assumptions in real time. The ambient sounds of the office, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant traffic, the occasional faint tap of a pen on polished wood, underscored the quiet gravity of the moment, the contrast between external calm and internal realization amplifying the significance of the decision-making process that had unfolded. Caroline's posture relaxed further, a small but unmistakable sign of deference, as she absorbed the implications of Amber's insights, the delicate adjustment of her shoulders signaling a recognition that intellect and preparation had indeed shifted the balance of authority in the room. Amber's calm demeanor, her deliberate movements, and her poised articulation created a space where clarity, expertise, and thoughtful strategy ruled, establishing an environment in which respect was earned and decisions were guided by insight rather than assumption or entitlement. The board members observed the subtle dynamics unfolding, each one attuned to the measured authority Amber conveyed, a recognition forming in their expressions that her knowledge, preparation, and composed execution had not only revealed critical information but had redefined the understanding of competence and influence within the room. Caroline's eyes met Amber's once more, a single nod almost imperceptible but profoundly meaningful, a quiet acknowledgement that the careful, reasoned guidance Amber provided was both decisive and transformative, solidifying the unspoken shift in respect and authority that had come to define the boardroom in these crucial moments. Amber Johnson stepped away from the conference table, the faint echo of her polished shoes against the hardwood floor blending with the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant city sounds beyond the glass walls, creating a calm yet resonant backdrop to the quiet authority she carried with her. She moved toward the expansive windows, pausing to look down over the city skyline, the sunlight catching the edges of the glass buildings and casting gentle reflections across the office floor, a visual reminder of the vast scale of decisions and responsibilities she navigated with clarity and precision. Caroline Smith remained seated, her posture straight but softened, the subtle shift of her shoulders indicating a growing acknowledgement of Amber's insight and the unspoken respect that had quietly formed throughout the meeting. Amber's hand rested lightly on the windowsill, her mind cataloging the sequence of moments that had unfolded, each detail of the discussion, each response, each subtle exchange, forming a complete picture of strategic clarity and deliberate influence that she had carefully maintained. The room, now filled with a measured calm, reflected the balance Amber had introduced, the polished surfaces, neatly arranged documents, and understated decor mirroring the order and thoughtful precision she exemplified. Board members continued to observe her subtly, a quiet reverence and recognition evident in their composed gestures, slight nods, and attentive expressions, acknowledging not only her expertise but the deliberate manner in which she had guided the conversation and influenced the assessment of the contract. Amber's gaze swept slowly across the room, registering the gentle shifts in demeanor, the relaxation of tense shoulders, the quiet affirmation in glances shared between executives, all signaling the subtle but profound impact of her reasoning and the strategic authority she projected. The sunlight shifted again, moving across the reflective surfaces, illuminating the soft contours of her expression, the clarity of her eyes, and the controlled, deliberate movements of her hands, underscoring the calm and unwavering confidence that had permeated the space and subtly redefined the dynamics of respect and recognition within the room. Caroline finally exhaled, a faint yet deliberate movement that seemed to release residual tension and acknowledge the correctness and thoroughness of Amber's analysis, the room collectively absorbing the implications of the careful reasoning and quiet authority that had reshaped expectations and understanding. Amber turned slightly toward the exit, the soft rustle of her clothing and the deliberate step echoing a sense of purpose and resolve, each motion a quiet demonstration of competence and composure. The boardroom settled into a still, reflective state, the polished table and orderly arrangement of documents now serving as silent witnesses to the authority, clarity, and strategic insight Amber had demonstrated, a presence that remained tangible even as she moved toward the doorway, leaving the space filled with a quiet affirmation of intelligence, integrity, and methodical influence that lingered in the light and the subtle echoes of her calm departure.